Welcome back to CIA Declassified. In the 1950s, the American public looked to names like CBS, the New York Times, and Time magazine as the ultimate arbitrators of truth. But behind the scenes, a different editor was at work. This was Operation Mockingbird. Conceived by Frank Wisner, the director of the Office of Policy Coordination, the program aimed to treat the global press not as a fourth estate, but as a mighty Wurlitzer, an organ that the CIA could play to produce any tune it desired. By the peak of the program, the agency had a stable for over 400 journalists who were essentially on the CIA payroll. The declassified records of the 1975 Church Committee hearings finally pulled back the curtain on just how deep the Mockingbird sang. The agency didn't just recruit street reporters, they went for the heads of the organizations. Declassified memos show that Philip Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post, was a key contact. He famously joked that you could get a journalist cheaper than a good call girl for a couple of $100 a month. A nonfiction quote from a declassified CIA memorandum on media relations from 1953. The agency must maintain a capability to provide guidance to key editorial figures. In matters of national security, the distinction between news and psychological warfare is often a matter of perspective. We have successfully placed stories regarding Soviet internal strife in over 20 major metropolitan dailies without attribution. End quote. The CIA provided its Mockingbird assets with classified briefings that were often slanted to support specific agency operations, such as the coups in Iran and Guatemala. Journalists would then publish these briefings as independent investigative reports. In exchange, the agency provided these reporters with exclusive travel access, scoops that discredited their rivals, and protection from the House Un-American Activities Committee. One of the most prolific assets was Joseph Alsop, a powerful syndicated columnist whose work appeared in over 300 newspapers. Declassified files show that in 1953, the CIA actually paid for Alsop to travel to the Philippines to cover elections there. His mission wasn't just to report, but to use his column to bolster the image of the CIA's preferred candidate, Ramon Magsaysay, ensuring a pro-American outcome. A quote from Carl Bernstein, The CIA and the Media from 1977. The use of journalists has been among the most productive means of intelligence gathering employed by the CIA. Although the agency has cut back on its use of reporters since 1973, it still maintains what officials call a handful of relationships with some of the most powerful figures in American journalism. End quote. The agency's reach extended to the world of book publishing through the front company known as the Bedford Publishing Company. Under Mockingbird, the CIA subsidized the publication of over 1,000 books, including works by defectors and anti-communist scholars, often without the authors themselves knowing that their royalty checks were originating from Langley. There's a long-standing speculation regarding the suicide of Philip Graham in 1963. While officially ruled a suicide due to clinical depression, some researchers speculate that Graham's internal conflict over his deep involvement with Mockingbird and his knowledge of the agency's domestic surveillance led him to a breaking point where he became a liability, leading to theories that his death was more convenient for the agency than it appeared. The Family Jewels documents, declassified in 2007, confirmed that the CIA engaged in Project Mockingbird, a subset of the larger operation, which specifically involved wiretapping two Washington-based journalists, Robert Allen and Paul Scott. This proved that the agency wasn't just collaborating with the press, it was actively spying on members of the media who refused to follow the official line. A quote from a declassified internal report on propaganda from 1967. Our cover organizations must appear to be completely autonomous and disinterested. The moment the public perceives a link between the information source and the government, the psychological value of the data drops to zero. We must master the art of the third-party validation, where a lie told by us is repeated by a professor, then reported by a journalist as fact. End quote. In the modern era, there is intense speculation that Operation Mockingbird never actually ended, but simply migrated to the digital frontier. Speculation suggests that the mighty Wurlitzer has been replaced by algorithmic influence in the seeding of influencers on social media platforms. Some argue that the CIA's venture capital arm in QTEL provides the modern mechanism for this, allowing the agency to have a silent editorial hand in the very code that determines what goes viral. While much of Mockingbird was exposed in the 70s, many of the specific names of journalists and the editorial veto logs remain heavily redacted in the National Archives. The heaviest redactions appear in the files concerning domestic election guidance. There is heavy speculation that the CIA used Mockingbird assets to actively sabotage the political campaigns of U.S. politicians who favored a softer stance on communism or who intended to cut the agency's budget. The theory suggests the redactions hide the fact that the CIA was essentially picking winners in American elections by manipulating the media coverage of candidates. Further speculation surrounds the Operation Mockingbird Phase 2 files. Some analysts believe these redactions hide a transition from human journalist to corporate ownership. The speculation is that the CIA stopped paying individual reporters and instead moved toward deep integration within the board of directors of major media conglomerates, ensuring that the master's voice remained consistent across entire networks without the need for individual bribes. Was Operation Mockingbird a success? From a cold operational standpoint, it was arguably the most successful psychological operation in history. It allowed the CIA to control the narrative of the Cold War for over 20 years without the American public ever suspecting their free press was compromised. A quote from William Colby, former CIA director. The CIA has over 800 plus relationships with media organizations and individuals. We don't own them, we just rent them for the specific purposes of the agency's mission, end quote. The success of the program eventually became its downfall. The discovery that the CIA had been lying to the American people through their own newspapers led to massive loss of public trust in the mid-1970s, resulting in the first real oversight committees being placed on the agency. Mockingbird fundamentally changed how intelligence agencies interact with information. Operational breakthroughs, the plurality of truth. The agency mastered the art of source diversification. They learned that if 3 different newspapers reported the same lie, the public would accept it as truth. This led to the creation of the global news network model of propaganda. Pseudo-non-governmental organizations. The CIA began creating fake think tanks and press foundations to provide a layer of academic legitimacy to the stories they were feeding to journalists. And rapid response propaganda. The project led to the development of scripted newsrooms where pre-written segments could be distributed to hundreds of local radio and TV stations simultaneously, a precursor to modern syndicated news packages. Today, the CIA officially states that it no longer recruits American journalists, but the legacy of Operation Mockingbird serves as a haunting reminder. The most powerful weapon in the world isn't a bomb or a bullet. It's the ink on a page and the voice on a radio. Next time on CIA Declassified, we move from the modern press to an ancient mystery. We examine the Voynich manuscript memo. Why was the CIA's top cryptographer, William Friedman, obsessed with a 15th century book that no one can read? We'll look at the declassified logs of how the agency's codebreakers spent their off hours trying to crack a manuscript that might be an elaborate hoax or a biological secret from another world. Join us for the unbreakable book. In the meantime, question the news. I'll see you in the archives.